So if you've been told you have spinal stenosis or a disc prolapse, but your pain still doesn't make any sense to you, it's probably because no one explained what's actually irritating your nerve. And until you understand that, you'll keep trying the wrong fixes. So over the last 12 years treating lower back pain and sciatica, and after helping thousands of patients, I can tell you something confidently. Most people aren't in pain because they're damaged. They're in pain because of pressure on one of their nerves. Not randomness, not bad luck, not because your spine is crumbling, but it's pressure. And today I'm going to explain the difference between a disc prolapse and spinal stenosis. Because even though they can feel similar, they behave very differently. And that difference changes how you approach recovery and how you actually heal and get back to doing the things that you love, exercising, playing with kids. So let's simplify this. A disc prolapse is when one structure, the disc, pushes backwards into the nerve space. So if I show you here, looking down on a disc, there are concentric rings like this. And in the middle, we have the jam. Think of it like a jam donut. So you've got the soft dough on the outside and then jam on the inside. And what can happen over time is these layers start to break and the jam can force its way out here, causing a bulge here. And if you have a nerve root coming out the side, that nerve root can get trapped by that disc, okay? And it can push back into that nerve space. So there are three types of disc problems. We have the bulge, we have the tear, and then we have full herniation. But it's usually one main structure irritating the nerve. So think of it like someone poking you in the back with one finger. Spinal stenosis is a narrowing of the nerve tunnel. So it's not usually just one thing. It's joint thickening, ligament thickening, disc height loss, arthritic changes, and it's a gradual crowding over time of that hole where the nerve comes out. So let me show you on here. You think these are the vertebrae here. They're stacked on one another. You have a disc in the middle there, and then there's a hole here where the nerve comes out. Now over time, if the disc starts to get closer together, this hole is going to get smaller. If there's joint crowding around this area as well with arthritis, then that hole is going to get smaller as well. So if you have any arthritic change around here, the nerve is going to have a smaller area to come out of. And also if you have like ligament hypertrophy around here, that can often push into the hole as well. So it's anything that's making the hole smaller. So instead of one finger poking you like with a disc, it's like the walls are slowly closing in, and both cause nerve pressure, both can cause problems and pain. But the pattern is very different, and this is really key. I'm going to show you exactly what happens here. So let me give you a real world pattern we see every single week in the clinic. So we had a patient come in, let's call him Mark. He was mid-40s. He lifted something awkwardly. He felt a sharp pain in his lower back, and he came in to see us. So within days, he had shooting pain down the leg, very typical type sciatica symptoms. Sitting was worse, bending forward was worse, coughing, sneezing, brutal, couldn't do them. So that's a classic disc behavior. We see this the whole time, at least 5 times a day. So one sudden structure is suddenly irritating that nerve. So the lesson here for Mark, disc prolapse often feels sharper. It can feel more sudden, comes on very suddenly. It's linked to a moment, so like bending over, twisting. This is generally speaking, not always, but just generally. And then 2, so let's compare that to another pattern. We think about stenosis. Let's call this lady Susan. She was late 60s. So stenosis tends to be later on. She had no dramatic injury, played a lot of golf as well at West Byfleet. Just a gradual increase over time of leg heaviness. She had aching, walking intolerance. She found it very difficult to walk uphill. So when someone says to us they find it difficult walking uphill or downhill, that's very typical of stenosis. And they say something very specific. So I can walk for 5 minutes, then I need to stop, sit down, and it gets better. I can walk for another 5 minutes. And then they also say when I lean forward on a shopping trolley, I feel much better and I can walk for much longer. So that's a classic stenosis behavior. So when you stand upright though, that narrows the canal more. So if I show you here, imagine if you're leaning forwards here, that's going to create more of a gap in this hole here. But if you're standing upright, it's going to put pressure down on these joints. It's going to create this hole to become a lot smaller, okay? So leaning like this, very, very good for stenosis. Opens that canal slightly. So the lesson here for Susan, stenosis is usually gradual, cumulative over time, and it can be worse when standing and walking. So here's where people get confused. Because both conditions can cause sciatic symptoms, numbness, pins and needles, leg pain. So symptoms alone don't tell the full story. Posture behavior often tells you more, and this is where most advice online is just falls apart. So here's a simple breakdown. This pain often hates sitting, slouching, bending forward like this, and stenosis, on the contrary, often hates standing, walking upright, extension positions, leaning backwards like this, and disc patients often stand to feel better. Stenosis patients often sit or lean forward to feel better. Now, this isn't a rule book. but it's just generally. But these patterns, they repeat constantly in our clinic. And we have 3 clinics now, 2 in Surrey, 1 in Buckinghamshire. We've seen over 10,000 new patients in the past 8 years, and we see this pattern over and over again. So when you understand this pattern, you stop randomly stretching everything and hoping for the best. There's also problems with MRIs, the MRI myth. So here's another critical point around stenosis versus discs. Scans describe structure. They do not measure nerve irritation. I've seen massive disc bulges with mild symptoms. So you often see an MRI like this. Say this is a disc and there's a big bulge coming out the side here, and it's putting pressure on the nerve that runs down the leg here. Okay, the nerve's in the middle here. And I've seen mild narrowing with severe symptoms. So the severity on the MRI does not equal severity of pain. When I was working in professional sport with Bournemouth, I saw a disc prolapse on a 25-year-old player, and it was huge. It was like a grade 3 disc prolapse, almost completely fallen off. And he said, I got a bit of back pain, but nothing in the legs, nothing. And then you see another person with a mild disc bulge, so a lot smaller than this, and they're in absolute agony. So always treat the person, not the scan. This is why people can panic unnecessarily. So pain is about how much the nerve is irritated, not how dramatic the scan looks. So whether it's stenosis, whether it's a disc prolapse, the goal isn't fixing the damage. It's managing the pressure on the area, whether it's the disc or whether it's the joint cavity. Got to reduce irritation, improving tolerance, and restore movement safely. And this is where conservative care fits in extremely well when properly assessed, because decompression for a disc prolapse is not set up the same way as decompression for stenosis. And we do that here in the clinic. Same tool, but different settings and a completely different outcome with different goals. It all comes down to the assessment and why that matters. So I had a patient recently who was told, you've got generation everywhere. It's just your age. They were in their mid-70s. So he stopped exercising, stopped playing golf, stopped walking, became really fearful. But when we assessed him properly, checked him over, checked his joints, his symptoms were clearly a stenotic pattern. So we adjusted his positioning, we worked on flexion tolerance, like this, gradually rebuilt his walking capacity, and within weeks, not years, within weeks, he was walking further than he had in a year. He wasn't running a marathon, but he was walking. So what do we learn here? Well, understanding the pressure pattern changes the strategy, and the strategy reduces the fear. If you've been confused by a scan or a diagnosis, but you're not sure whether your symptoms behave more like a disc or stenosis, we've put together a free workshop where you can come and check everything out. You can get a diagnosis, you can try out spinal decompression therapy here. It will walk you through exactly everything. We'll go through your symptom patterns, go through your position testing, what to avoid, how to get back to doing the things you love, and also when to seek further help. So if you want to come in, if you're confused, if you're scared, and you want to get a second opinion on what's going on with your body, whether it could be spinal stenosis, whether it could be a disc prolapse, then why don't you come in, have a free check with one of our team here. You can have a go on the spinal decompression machine. We can assess you properly and understand exactly what is going on. We have a decompression challenge happening at the moment, so if we think it's suitable for that, we're trying to gather loads of data across Surrey and Buckinghamshire to understand exactly what responds best to certain parameters on the testing. We know what we do works. We just want to get more data and produce a research study. So if you are interested, please put your details below and we'll give you more information about how you can apply for that.